Hi, I'm Aziza. I'm a second year medical student at Imperial and I'm back with my second video. So today I want to talk about tackling interviews and pursuing a career in medicine if you struggle with anxiety. If you know me for a long time, you know that I've wanted to be a doctor basically my whole life. Either that or I was brainwashed since birth and I now don't know the difference. The plan was medicine either way. But in 2017, when I started having to make choices about what I wanted to do in the future, I sat my parents down and I was like, I don't think I want to be a doctor. I don't think I can be a doctor because I find it so hard to talk to people, which at the time, honestly, that was an understatement. I literally found it impossible to speak to people. I was like, well, that would be such a huge part of my job. Communication is a massive part of being a doctor. And my parents, being Asian parents, of course, they were like, what? Why would you not want to be a doctor? And I was like, They were completely not having that. We argued it out for ages, but eventually I decided to still go through with it. Basically, this video is to encourage people, no matter what you think of yourself right now, if you want to be a doctor, then you should still pursue it. I'm going to split this into parts. First, I'm going to talk about my own personal journey. And then secondly, I'll talk about some tips on how to tackle interviews if you struggle with anxiety. Part one. I'm making this video because I don't want anyone to think that I can't be a doctor because I struggle with social anxiety, I struggle with general anxiety, or with any mental health issue for that matter. Because who you are at the beginning of medical school will be completely unrecognizable to you in 5 or 6 years when you actually finish and you become a doctor. You will grow so much in those 5 or 6 years. You will learn to cope with your anxiety or whatever it is. I'm just applying it to anxiety because that's what I struggle with, but whatever mental health issue or barrier you think you have, you will learn to manage your anxiety and deal with your mental health issue alongside your education or your career. It is never something that should stop you from doing what you want to do. So when I was around 16 to 18, my social anxiety was so bad that I wouldn't get, I needed to get places and I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go because I needed to get the bus to get there. And I mean, this is different in London because you don't need to speak to the bus driver, but I would be so scared to tell the bus driver where I needed to go that I would completely avoid bus journeys. I just wouldn't get the bus because as soon as I got on the bus, I would be shaking and panic and stressed. So thinking, oh, what if I get this wrong? What if I get this, what if I don't say, I want to go to town, please, properly? And I would think about that so much that I just physically couldn't get the bus. So it is funny, it's funny, but it's something that I genuinely struggled with. I would literally, I could have cried. I'd even wait at the bus stop and then I'd be actually can't do this. And then I'd walk instead, even though the walk would be an hour long. So that's just one example, right? Another example is when I was on work experience and the consultant who I was shadowing asked me to tell him my name and a bit about myself. And so I answered, obviously, in a quiet little voice, saying, oh, I'm Aziza, I do apology, I'm so cool. And then he told me to speak up, and then I was already fumbling, and then when he told me to speak up, I was like, oh my god. And I just immediately, I was shaking already anyway, and I immediately started crying, and I just couldn't stop crying. And then the consultant was looking at me what have I just done? But obviously he hadn't done anything. I was just so anxious all the time. Anyway, I was a complete blubbering anxious mess, and the consultant later on in that day said to me that if you're like this, then you're not going to be able to get through medical school. And I don't hold any hard feelings against him because he was right. That was fair and correct. But if you are at that stage right now, you can change, you can grow. That should not stop you from applying ever, because you can work on it. Look at me now. There are way more examples, but I don't want to bore you. It's not that interesting. It's just that I was a mess. The point is that I could barely talk to anyone. My self-esteem was so low. I had no confidence in myself or my abilities. And if you know me now, you will probably find that, hopefully you'll find that hard to believe now. Or if you're watching this video, you'll find it hard to believe. Maybe not if you know me. But anyway, despite all that, my parents convinced me to apply. Convinced / forced, it doesn't matter. And I applied anyway. But then it came to interviews. I flunked my first 2 interviews because my coping mechanism for anxiety, social anxiety, was that I would overcompensate. So what I would do is I would laugh a lot and I would just act really nonchalant and casual. Obviously, that's not how you approach an interview. So I walked into my Cambridge interview and my Birmingham interview like acting as if I was talking to my friends. Like, obviously you have to do something different, right? But that was the only way that I could cope with my anxiety, was just to pretend this is a casual interaction and just make it seem like I don't care. And you don't want your interviewers to think that you don't care, but that was my approach. So I didn't get an offer from Cambridge, and I did not get an offer from Birmingham. So those 2 interviews were in December, and I got the results for those in January. And when I got rejected from the first 2 unis that I had interviewed for, that, like, my confidence was already down here, and then it went like, there was, honestly, that's the most severe knock to my confidence. And I was like, well, that's it, I'm never gonna get into medical school. Like I said, Mum, I can't talk to people, and now it's even more clear. Like, my social anxiety is so overwhelming that I can't do it. I just can't do it. Because my parents were very, very desperate for me to get into medicine, and we are fortunate enough to be able to afford whatever this thing was. They put me in this like 1-day interview course to like make me better at interviews. Yeah, so that gave me the small bit of confidence that I needed to help me ace my Imperial and Barts interviews. Obviously, not everyone has access to that kind of stuff, and I was very, very lucky to have it. And the reason I'm making this video is to share what I learned from that, because you definitely shouldn't be charged for something like that. Now we're on part 2, how you can do it too. My first tip is, for anxious people, you need to be prepared for anything, because I would get completely overwhelmed with anxiety when an interviewer would ask me a question that I'd never heard before. Complete panic overdrive. I'm like, I can't answer this. There's no way I can answer this. Like, that's it. I flunked it. I need to just leave. Just walk out the room. Like, you're not gonna get through to this school. So to get ahead of this, what you should do is make flashcards for like all the basic questions that they would ask. Don't learn it off by heart, obviously, but learn it so much so that you have like an outline of what you would say if someone asked you that question, so you're never caught off guard. Simple tip, but that's my first tip. So the second thing I want to say is, I would also get really stressed and nervous when I didn't want to give a generic answer for something, but I don't know what to say other than the generic answer. So for example, like, why do you want to go into medicine? Immediately all my head could think was, because I like helping people, because I want to do science and also talk to people. But obviously they've heard that answer a million times before. Like, how am I meant to make that answer better? To make sure that you don't stumble here, this is like a really simple method to answer all of the classic generic questions, like, why do you want to do medicine? What did you get from your work experience? How can you show that you're good at teamwork? How can you show that you're a good leader? So there's a structure called STAR for answering interview questions. So you've got S, situation, T, task, A, action, R, result, and extra R for reflection. That gave me a little bit more confidence, because if I felt lost in how I was answering the question, I had a structure in my head, so I knew where I had to get. And I think that really helps if you struggle with anxiety. You will not fumble because you have this structure in your head, and then you know, do you know what, if my T point isn't going well, just skip to the next point. Just make sure that you're following a structure and you don't get completely lost in your head with all the thoughts that you have going on. For example, if my question was, why do you want to go into medicine? Why do you want to do medicine? I would start off my answer by like saying, I want to go into medicine because I enjoy working with people, and I would really like to help people. And I know that's a cliche answer, but I would like to help people. And the way through which I'd like to help people is by going into this career that involves a lot of science, which is a subject I really enjoy, but especially because I did work experience at a hospital, and that really furthered my desire to go into a career pursuing medicine. And then you jump into talking about your work experience, because that is what makes you different to all the other candidates. This is something that makes you unique. You are the only person that experienced your specific work experience. And then you start in with your situation. So the situation was, I did work experience at Ipswich Hospital, or I did work experience at Norfolk Park Hospital. Set the scene, basically. Then T, task. What were you doing exactly that like suddenly inspired you? So T, an example for me is that when I was on my work experience in a hospital, I was on the endocrinology ward. So that's still an S. I was on the endocrinology ward, but then T, there was this man that he weighed about 45 kilograms. He was so weak and frail because he suffered from type 1 diabetes, and he was refusing to take care of himself or give himself insulin or anything. And so he'd ended up in a situation like that because, as well as suffering from diabetes, he also suffered with depression and other mental health issues, which led to him getting to that sort of stage. And the task at hand was for the doctor to talk him down and, you know, build a rapport to convince him to start taking care of himself again and not end up in this situation again in hospital. And the A, the action. What did he do? How did he talk this guy down and convince him to, you know, inject your insulin, eat something, like take care of yourself, please. We don't want to see you in a state like this. So then I would say the doctor used like calm language. He spoke to him as like a peer instead of talking down to him, and he communicated with him well. The A, that action, that's what he did. And then the results were the patient heard him out and he was like, yeah, okay, I'll eat, like I'll take that one step further. And like obviously didn't cure him of his depression, but you know, he was like, okay, I'll eat something, I will take my insulin, I won't refuse medication, because he was being really stubborn. And yeah, the action that the doctor did helped convince him to allow them to treat him. So the final R, the reflection, what I would say is, so seeing the way that the doctor talked him down and convinced this patient to allow him to treat him, to help him onto a better path, and hopefully he doesn't end up in that situation in the hospital again. The doctor had built up an earlier rapport with him. He knew this patient, and the patient trusted him enough to help him. I'd like to have this kind of impact in someone else's life, and that's why I would like to be a doctor. So that's not a perfect answer because I just came up with it on the spot there. But if you wrote that out and you had this outline and then you looked at it a couple of times, you would have a smooth answer there. And I'm not going to give you a smooth answer now because I don't particularly want to revise how to do an interview again. But I hope that outline helps you answer questions, because you can use that same outline for how would I be a good leader? Hopefully you can follow this structure to create answers for yourself, and then you won't be tripped up by interviews. I hope that helps. And if it doesn't, just ask me more questions in the comments and I'll try and make it clearer in another video. I can go into more depth on role plays and ethics questions, but if I say it now, it's going to make this video way too long. It's already way too long. So leave a comment if you want more advice on how to do interviews that way. So anyway, after this course, I had like a little bit extra confidence, but after my Imperial interview on the way home, I still burst into tears. I burst into tears as soon as I walked out of my Bart's interview, and my mum was thinking, pre the 2 offers I got, she was thinking, what the hell, like we took this girl on an interview course and she's still a complete mess. And it was really hard, but I did it. And of course, I still struggle with social anxiety. This was something that almost made me not even apply for medicine. And that's why I'm making this video so early, even though it's not interview season now, because if you think that you cannot talk to people and you cannot tackle interviews, that is not true. You can train yourself to do it. I still feel really nervous when I do my role plays now. I'm still so petrified, but I can appear confident. So, you know, fake it till you make it is really a true proverb. Obviously, my struggle is not even nearly as big as some other people that I know. I'm just using this as an example because it's what I know. I know a lot of people that have thought maybe I can't pursue medicine because of a certain mental health issue that has prevented them from doing it. And that's not true. That's not true. You can do it. You are definitely good enough to do it. It is an ongoing journey with anything to do with mental health, but you should never let it stop you pursuing your career choice. Don't let anxiety stop you from pursuing a medical career. You are definitely good enough, and I promise you, you can do it. Most of your thoughts are irrational. You are more than capable. And you're not supposed to be perfect at the beginning of going to medical school. There's a reason that you're going to medical school in the first place. You know, it's to learn, it's to grow, and it's not just about, you know, all of the rote learning and all of the memorization. It's also about growing as a person and becoming better equipped to be a doctor, better equipped to talk to people. That's what it's all about. So don't worry if you're not perfect at the beginning. If you were perfect at the beginning, there would be no point in going to university. And then by the end of medical school, you are still going to be improving, because being a doctor is a vocation. You are always striving to be better. It can be really intimidating how confident other medical applicants are, but trust me, there are people in the same boat as you. If you need any help on anything to do with this, or if you need to talk to someone to encourage you, please message me at pathwaytomed on Instagram, or email me at pathwaytomedmentoring@gmail.com, and I can hopefully give you a pep talk that's good enough to convince you to still do medicine. And as always, comment below if there's any more videos that you want to see, and like it, subscribe it. I don't know, I'm not a very good YouTuber. I hope that was a helpful video. Sorry for talking too much about myself, but I hope that makes you feel like you can do it too.